Shavua Tov, here is a Dvar Torah from Parashat Lech Lecha. To fix the world is in our blood. And I say that not just as a figure of speech, but literally, it is in our blood to fix the world. To what do I refer? So we're reading Parashat Lech Lecha. I sometimes get confused and stuck in other parshas. So we're going to touch on Bereshit, and we may even touch on next week Vayera. The end of Parashat Bereshit, we find something very difficult to understand. Mankind has become corrupt, and Hashem regrets having created mankind. How could Hashem regret having created what he created? Didn't he create a perfect world? Didn't it say at the end of the story of the creation itself that Hashem saw everything that he had made and it was very good? V'hinei tov ma'od, it was very good. How could he regret anything? What does this mean? Did God make a mistake? Chas v'sholom, can we say such a thing? Of course not. So that's question number one. Question number two, at the end of our parsha, Lech Lecha, my teacher, Harav Aaron Soloveitchik, asks, there is a apparent contradiction in the mitzvah of brit mila as it relates to Avraham. Now, Avraham made a brit mila, and a brit mila, the circumcision, is in a sense, a contraction. It is a very nationalistic thing. It is just for the Jewish people. So that is a contraction. We are separating ourselves from humanity. But then again, at that very brit milah of Avraham, or I should call him Avram, at the brit milah he got a name. Like we always give a name to the baby, so this time the baby was 99 years old. It was Avram, and we gave him a new name. Hashem gave him a new name, Avraham. Now he's Avraham, and what does the extra hey symbolize? Av hamon goyim, you are going to be the father of many nations. Well, that is not a contraction, that's an expansion. Now he's becoming an international figure. So which is it? Which is it with the Brit Milah? Is it a contraction to our own nation, our own national family? Or is it an expansion towards all of humanity? The mitzvah itself is a contraction, and yet the name that Abraham gets is an expansion. So there seems to be a little bit of tension between those things. So let's take a closer look, first of all, at the mitzvah of Brit Milah. The mitzvah of Brit Milah has two elements to it. One is the removal of the foreskin, and the second is the letting of some blood during the process. And both are required if there is a situation where a baby is born, for example, without a foreskin. Such things do happen. So then all that has to be done is a little bit of blood has to be extracted. And if somebody is converting, for example, and they had a circumcision, as do many among the non-Jews, so then they do again hatafat dam brit. They cause a dry drop of blood of the covenant to be extracted. So those two elements, the removal of the foreskin and the extraction of a drop of blood, are critical parts of the mitzvah of Brit Milah. What does this come to teach us? So let's take a look at the main event, the removal of the foreskin, which teaches us that the world, and we as human beings, are created imperfect. We have blemish, that is the foreskin, which needs to be fixed. And that is not just our physical selves. There's also a pasuk, unmaltemet or lat levavchem, you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart. This does not mean that we need to all get online at Hadassah to have heart surgery. Chas v'shalom, everybody should be well. Nobody should need heart surgery. It's not referring to a physical foreskin. It's referring to a spiritual one, to the character traits that we all have in different measures. Some of us have a problem with anger. Some of us have a problem with jealousy. Some of us have a problem with I don't know, there could be 100 different variations or more of the challenges of character that every human being has, and nobody was born perfect, nobody was born as an angel, and therefore it's part of our job not just to physically fix ourselves through the Brit Milah, but also spiritually to fix ourselves through circumcising the foreskin of the heart, through fixing the character traits. And so it is with the entire world. The world was created imperfect, and that was by design. That was what Hashem wanted. Why? Because God created the world because he is the ultimate good. And in the nature of the good is to do good. Darko shel hatov lehitiv. The way of that which is good is to do good to others. So that is the expression of good. So God created man not to be the recipient, but God created man in his own image, that man himself should have this higher level of fulfillment, which is to do good and fix the world. In other words, one who takes and just takes, that is not a recipe for happiness. It's when one does good and contributes and gives and fixes, that's the recipe for true spiritual and internal and emotional happiness. And God wanted man to have the maximum happiness, so he created man imperfect in an imperfect world and said, now you go fix the rest. Now that is exactly what God planned to do, and that's why it says, God saw everything he had made, and it was very good, because there was going to be good within it, good doing good and fixing further along. And that is what God wanted. But what happened was it didn't turn out that way. Mankind got corrupted, and instead of fixing the world, he made things worse. And so God said, okay, reset button, and he stops it and brings the flood and starts again with Noah. But this time with Noah, there's a covenant, and a covenant is an agreement between two sides. Each one gives something to the other in exchange for what the other gives the first. So the covenant with Noah set into the principle of reward and punishment in a more seen and visible fashion, that humankind can suffer if they do not fulfill their role, and their suffering is what they give to God in exchange for God then relieving their suffering. And this came to a pinnacle with the covenant between the pieces which Abraham had with God, where God says your descendants are going to serve a foreign nation for 400 years and then they're going to be redeemed. In other words, Jews are going to suffer, and that is what we contribute to the covenant, and then God contributes redemption. And so it is that we have the whole story of the Exodus from Egypt, which was the covenant. We suffered, and then God brought his redemption. And later on in the Torah, God makes further covenants along these lines in the Tochecha, the rebukes, where if we don't behave, so then God will bring the suffering. That'll be our contribution. And then at the end, he will again redeem us. However, in those cases, there is an option to avoid that by ourselves creating our own suffering, as it were, but I will choose a better word than suffering, our own sacrifice. And where do we see that? In the brit mila. That is a voluntary brit, that we enter into it. We enter into it and we choose to make the commitment, right? A person can choose not to do it, in which case they have a sin, and then there are consequences for that. But when we choose it, what are we doing? We are saying that we believe that our role is to fix the world. And how do we fix the world? With dam, with blood. Blood means sacrifice. That is in our very nature. It is not something that is just a nice thing. It's nice to fix the world. No, it is in our very nature that we fix the world through sacrifice. We are makriv, we sacrifice in order to fix the world. And this is built into nature, for example, in the world of music. If everything is just happy and good and there's no sacrifice, there's no suffering, there's no challenge, the music is boring. If I just write something in the major scale, it's boring. Okay, it doesn't have anything. You got to put in some tension, some release. If somebody were to write a story about a child born to a wealthy family, and the child grows up and is an excellent student, and they graduate and they win the lottery and they become even richer, and they get a beautiful house and marry a beautiful wife and have beautiful children and have a beautiful career and live to 120 in good health. So this is a boring story. I mean, it's happy, but nobody wants to read that. We want to hear about, the aliens that landed on the roof and kidnapped them or something like that. Some kind of challenge that a person overcomes in order to achieve a fixing. And that is, we love it in music, tension, in literature, and everything, because that is who we are. Human beings were made to sacrifice in order to fix the world, and the world was made imperfect so that we should have the need and the ability to fix it. And that is the dual elements of the brit milah. The removal of the foreskin is fixing the world. And how do we do it? B'hakrava, by sacrifice, by blood. So now we can understand what happened with Abraham at that brit, because when Abraham has the brit, it's a different type of a nationalism. The usual interpretation of nationalism is a country or a people feel that they are the best, they are a master race, they are, us alone, and the rest of the world is out there. Not at all. Our nationalism is the nationalism of, I would say, the stewardess or the flight attendant, on an airplane. What does the flight attendant tell you? That if there's a need for oxygen and the thing comes down, you put it on yourself first, in order so that you should then be able to put it on the people on either side of you. Because if you try to put it on them, you're going to need it. You might not be able to function. So you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of everybody else. And that is what the Jewish people believes that nationalism is. We take care of ourselves in order to take care of the rest of humanity. So it's a tzimtzum, a contraction, by doing the actual act of the brit milah. But by this, Avram gets a new name, Avraham. Now he is a worldly figure. a figure focused on all of humanity, not just his own people. And we see this immediately in next week's parsha. In next week's parsha, we find Abraham 3 days after the brit mila. He's in terrible pain, terrible discomfort, and it's a heat wave. It's at least 40 degrees Celsius, maybe more. Fahrenheit, it's up in 100. I don't know, like some of the hot weather we know we've had here in Eretz Israel in the summer. It's a really hot day. He's in pain. He's uncomfortable. He's sitting there meditating, communing with God, and he says, "Wait a second, God. I see at the end of the field 3 pagans who worship the dust on their feet. I've got to run like a marathon, like an Olympic sprinter, to go and bring them back here and sit them down and feed them and give them what to drink and let them rest." In other words, he had just done this contraction of the brit milah, and that contraction pushed him to be extra sacrificial, to sacrifice his own comfort in order to fix the world, to fix humanity, to invite these 3 pagans. That's who he thought they were. At the end of the day, they were angels, but he thought they were pagans. That is the Jewish people. Now, that is why I say that to fix the world, the taken olam, is literally in our blood. May we continue to, of our own initiative, bring those sacrifices to fix the world, and then we don't need all of the tochecha. By our initiative of sacrificing to fix the world, we bring close the day when the entire world will indeed be fixed. There will be peace, there will be redemption, there will be Mashiach. May it be soon. Shavuot Tov.